and welcome to the Industry 4.0 Club, also referred to as the I4.0 Club. Our main purpose is to engage the power of diverse worldwide talent to accelerate evolution to Industry 4.0. We accomplish this by hosting respectful, thoughtful, and interdisciplinary open conversations. Our aim is to create quality content on wide-ranging Industry 4.0 topics to expand the reach of the community. We're glad you've decided to join us for today's conversation. I'd like to wish a good local time to everyone. This is Women in Manufacturing, a conversation on topics around I-40 with a focus on tech and manufacturing. In this space, we discuss the perspectives and challenges of women at work and at home. Our topic of discussion for today is titled Persistence and Passion in Industrial Automation. I'm Carol Mitchell-Lin, an I4.0 Club co-founder. For over 5 years, I've been creating content for I4.0 adoption in manufacturing. When I'm not supporting my fellow co-founders, I'm a content marketing specialist at Raven, where we help manufacturers engage operators to provide meaningful human context to production on the shop floor. First, I'd like to introduce my co-host and fellow Industry 4.0 Club co-founder, Grace Donovan. Hi, Grace.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Carol. Hello, everyone. I'm Grace Donovan. As Carol mentioned, I'm also a co-founder of the Industry 4.0 Club and have the honor of co-hosting with Carol every other Monday. I am the head of business development in the US for Andonics. We are a connected worker solution provider, connecting the top floor with the shop floor and ensuring that people are connected to processes and machines so businesses can make better business decisions. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Grace. And today we're pleased to have as our special guest, Courtney Fernandez, applications engineer at Universal Robots, who's joining us today from California. Hi, Courtney.
How's it going?
Good. We really appreciate you taking time to be with us today, especially since it's early morning for you there.
It's always a good time in California.
Is that the state motto?
That's the state motto. It's always sunny.
There you go. Always sunny. Not in Philadelphia, but definitely in California. Well, welcome, Courtney. We are so excited to have you today. We were actually introduced by another guest that we've had on Women in Manufacturing before, Nikki Gonzalez. So you and I had the pleasure of meeting at the Detroit Automate Conference, which was full of very cool, very big robots. And so before we dive in, could you tell us a little bit about you and to help the audience get to know yourself and your story and give us an idea of where you are today and the path that took you to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an applications engineer with Universal Robots. I've been with the company now for just over a year. But prior to that, I actually worked for a systems integrator. And if you go way, way back, I graduated in 2008 and I started working in embedded systems design. And I was really kind of mediocre at it. Mm-hmm. And I had this moment where I realized one day that my imposter syndrome, where I walk around feeling like, oh, one day everybody's just going to discover I'm a huge phony. I'm not actually that great of an engineer and I don't know what I'm doing. And, that I feel like every engineer has that for a little while, but it was really that the oomph and the drive and the passion for embedded systems just really wasn't there for me. So I was kind of floundering through it until a large series of other events led me to moving down to Los Angeles, because I was originally from the Bay Area. And I got married. I had kids. My career took a huge turn towards automation. And it was really a chance. I applied for my first job in Los Angeles was refinery. And they were making a robotic crawler that went up and down these refinery tubes, up and then all the way back down to do X-ray scans on them to see how viable the tubing still was from not just the inside out, but the outside in, make sure there's no cracks either inside or outside that are going to compromise it. And they could get like 15 more years out of the tubing, but it was really dirty, really I don't want to say it was awful, but maybe it wasn't for me, but the robot was really cool. And I wandered into by a really weird connection for like a daughter-in-law of a friend kind of weird thing. But I ended up working for a company that was an OEM machine builder, and it was United Bakery Equipment. And they make the machines that slice and wrap and bag bread. And from there, I just ended up working in from an OEM for systems integration. I did machine vision, and then I tried to form my own company with my husband. So we had an S Corp called Fast One Solutions for a while, where we were running around trying to do everybody else's job for them so that they wouldn't have to hire full-time engineers. And that worked out pretty well. But, not having a W-2 salary during the pandemic proved to be a little bit difficult. So when I started looking for work to do again, in W-2 land, the person listing the job at Universal Robots is somebody that I've known for 7 years. And I was like, yes, this actually seems like it would be a fantastic move to make right now. So a lot of what I've done is sort of the result of hard work, but probably equally as much by chance and just good luck.
Well, isn't that what they say about luck? Is that, preparation combined with good timing?
Yep.
So, I mean, I think, it's certainly, it's nice to recognize like the luck and good chances that we've had in life, but I think it also discredits maybe a lot of the work that we've put in. And so I'm just saying, like, let's acknowledge that too, because you mentioned like like a lot of passion, that you were kind of mediocre at like embedded systems. And oftentimes, and maybe like, I don't think this is unique to just me, but I know that I've certainly experienced it, is that when I have difficulty kind of academically or even in practice with something, to me, I'm like, okay, like if it's not coming easy, I'm not going to be good at it. This is not going to be something that I'm going to continue forward with. But you really saw beyond that, and you said that like this is just I have to like look how to apply these skill set in a different way. Right. And I kind of get to that because kind of in an academic setting, if we look at like statistically speaking, like girls oftentimes like outperform boys, and so we have this idea that like, okay, if it must come easy, if it doesn't, I'm not good at it. And so that actually like kind of hinders sometimes that perseverance aspect. And so I just think that this is really fantastic. Like when we find difficult things, instead of throwing in the towel, like really persevering and doubling down on the passion side of that. So what maybe helped shape your mindset to pursue automation when certain aspects of the engineering and applications like didn't necessarily come easy to you?
So really the only thing that comes easy to me is like eating tacos and talking.
And yeah, I think a lot of people can relate.
I can't do that for a living. So really whatever it is, I got to find something and get good at it so that I can do it for a living. But really what drove me was find a way to like it. Cause you got to do this not every day, but for the next 40 years, you got to do this and, make a living out of it. So I really focused on looking for things that would try to actually spark that passion. So it was a lot of experimenting. I actually, the number of job interviews I had was rather high, and not because, everybody was saying no, or I was ready to just jump in and say no, but during the conversation, it just became clear, like maybe this is not going to be a good fit. So just being willing to have those upfront conversations about like, what is it that you expect me to do? And then asking myself, or, for anybody else, like asking yourself, do I really actually want to do that? Or will I enjoy doing that full time?
Yeah, those are certainly important questions I think everyone needs to be asking, because you don't want, work to be a burden that you really resent, right? Like you need to find a way to really enjoy it. And honestly, based on the kind of the stories that I've heard you tell about all sorts of things that you do with robots, the passion is definitely there. I was telling Courtney kind of as we were preparing for this, that I always learn new applications or new ideas or ways to apply robots in situations. And you were just telling me this morning about applying robots in martial arts.
So I would love to come up with this full product, to be honest. And I'm sure I haven't fully conceived it yet, but I made a video with my old boss, Greg McIntyre, several years ago. And I say made it with him as in he went on vacation and I used the robot while he was on vacation, but he didn't fire me over it or anything. He
Great.
Like, this is kind of cool. What did you do? I had a robot grabbing a kick target and moving around, and I was I was boxing kind of with the robot, kicking the target. And then this Saturday, I finally had a chance to bring the robot with me to my martial arts studio. And I thought I was going to kind of take it in the back. And I showed a couple of the instructors, and they ultimately brought the children's class over, like, hey, check out this robot. So I had basically my hand over the one part of the robot that's not collaborative, which is the 2-finger gripper. The 2 fingers were made out of metal that were holding the kick target. So I was basically had my hand over that part, but the robot was just moving around for the kids, and they were boxing with the robot and they loved it. So my thought behind that was multiple times when you're practicing with a human partner and they're holding a kick target up for you, there's like an angle for every kick, and for you specifically, for your height and for how you throw your kick, that you're kind of trying to work with your partner. If they know you well, you kind of adjust them, hold it right. You teach the robot that position once, and it's going to go to that spot every single time. So I always have this thought of, having a robotic training partner that just presents targets to me perfectly. It would be a fun thing to execute.
Everyone can become Jackie Chan with their personal training robot, right?
Precisely. I don't know if I need to cover it with a pool noodle or something, because if you miss the target and accidentally kick the robot,
oh yeah,
it's going to hurt. So that's the only part I haven't really thought my whole way around. Plus, I don't know how you're going to feel about buying an expensive robot and then kicking it and punching it.
Well, my expectation would be, of course, that it is, designed for shop floor environments where things can happen. So it should be able to sustain a kick.
I mean, everybody's wanted to punch the robot once, I'm sure, but to actually put a target on it and really punch it.
And they're still here.
Yes.
Now, Courtney, I like to go back to what you mentioned about your interviews and your thought process when you're trying to determine if the job is a good fit for you, the role. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering is how many of the skills required for that role would you consider that you would need to know versus, okay, these are the skills that I would learn, because they say, the idea that women usually select roles based on, they have all the skills, then like, how does that work for you? Like, where are you willing to take on a job where you still have skills that you need to learn?
Right. It took me a long time to arrive at the conclusion that if I can check every single box, that I'm probably overqualified for the position. And that likely it's going to lead to a lot of boredom, because if I checked every single box, I already have all those skills. I'm not learning anything new, and it's only a matter of time before the job becomes very mundane. So I like to have a good mix of new things. How I select what those new things are is, I'm not sure how I identify that myself. I just kind of wake up one day like, I'm going to learn Wing Chun. I don't know. It's just like I pick very interesting things to learn, and then I see what sticks. Like, I'm always willing to experiment with new stuff. But if I try something for a few minutes, I'm like, yes, this is actually stirring something up. It's stirring up a feeling, maybe not passion right away, but like, yes, I could continue doing this because it's sparking that thirst a little bit. Like, I want to learn it more. I want to get good at it. So it's really just kind of a feeling of, I almost want to say, if you don't play video games, it's just something that you pick up and try really quick. And if it sucks you in, you feel it. And I don't know how to describe that feeling of being sucked in.
Kind of like it's more like a gut thing. And I'm wondering if that's what you're teaching your girls. We saw a few days ago that you posted a cute video about you teaching your daughters how to program a cobot. And I guess that way they're learning skills without even realizing.
Oh yeah.
Now, how where do you see the value in that, and how do you see that extending to working with others to encourage girls to pursue STEM?
Right. So showing girls having fun with it, I think, is very important, because nobody wants to go into something that looks mundane or like unenjoyable. So showing, just being able to show that, like, yes, we do this, we have fun when we're doing it, but really letting the kids kind of, not just with the robot, but with lots of things, just what can this do? I don't want to restrict their thinking as far as presenting them my own ideas. I kind of try to let them fabricate ideas. So forget the robot. The other day we had marshmallows out and my daughter asked if she could have some food coloring and paint with the marshmallows and paint her food. And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. It could be a little bit messy, but I'm not one to say no unless it's really just dangerous. Like landing on the concrete is unforgiving. Certain things I have to say no to, but other experiments, I just kind of make it my policy to say yes. Experiment, have fun, see what tickles the passion in your brain. And I think the way they do this is, I mean, I'm entertained by it. Other friends bring over their kids, and you know, just on an individual basis, they will happily show other kids how to use it. Like they're excited about it, and they're like, "Hey, watch this! I can show you how it moves and everything." So, really, it's just it's a great thing for me. It's been a great thing just to have in my house, and then to have the girls growing into who they are and their curiosity. Those two things together have just been perfect.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. My thought is not fully formed. So.
Well, this is perfect because, you know, as parents, we often envision a path for our kids, and it's not always what they might, what the path that they might follow, however, we try and teach them to think so they can decide what their own path is. And like you said, through experimentation and giving them a chance to test and fail and adjust and move ahead with that. Now your path has led you to a master's degree in control systems and robotics.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, you know, how if this is relevant, how its relevance is in today's world.
You know, I'm going to admit, I'm not sure it ever was relevant in automation. I woke up one day and just decided I needed more student loan debt. But I saw in 2015, I kind of, when I was working for the OEM, I saw this progression towards like machine vision and robots knowing about their surroundings, or giving robots perception, or just seeing automation in general kind of taking over production and being like, I feel like this is something I should dig deeper into. However, I would say anybody else looking at pursuing a master's degree for automation, it's wholly unnecessary. I don't even think, like, a bachelor's degree also helps, but if you have a trade degree, you want to be a trade electrician, you know, trade welder, I feel like those are really excellent paths to pursue right now. And I'm one of those people that will constantly advocate, you know, if there's like this, I want to say it's made up, but like this us versus them scenario where it's like college degrees versus trade degrees. And I have a college degree, and tradesmen are my heroes. Like I'm an electrical engineer and I've wired up a panel. And if you put my panel next to a trade electrician's panel, it's very obvious which one of them has 10,000 hours mastery of wiring panels, and it's not me. So, you know, that kind of mentality is something I've carried with me now, where it's the skills that you learn, not necessarily the title that goes in front of your name, you know? So like the master's degree for me, I don't regret getting it. I learned a lot, and the places where I use it the most are actually when I'm giving trainings for like we do core training and advanced training for the robots. And people will come up with questions like, why is this called singularity? I'm like, well, because the transformation matrix is singular in this particular case. And I can talk in detail a little bit about the linear algebra that goes into it. But really, as far as practical applications go, the robot's doing that math for you. You don't need to have a master's degree to do that math. The robot can do that math. So, you know. It's not, I wouldn't discourage you from getting a master's degree if that's like really your passion, like just education is very important to you, but I would say it's definitely not necessary in automation.
Well, I think that's an important like thing to mention, and I certainly appreciate that, because like we see such a big shift now happening with like the skills that are needed on the shop floor. There is such a big demand for like this specific skill set in working with robots. And oftentimes you're automating away kind of very manual tasks that no one wants to do anyway. But like, how much cooler is it instead of maybe like unloading a shipping container of boxes, now you get to program the robot that gets to do that, right? So knowing that it's, and like, coming from someone with experience in the industry, and of course, like, the additional credential of a master's degree, that like, no, you don't need this necessarily. It makes it much more accessible to a lot of folks. And I think, like where there's passion, there's certainly always a way to kind of figure that out.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd rather be
any additional
persistent
comment.
and smart. I'll say that much.
I'm
actually thrilled that you guys went with the title persistence, because for me, I am definitely not the smartest person, and never will be, but I might just be the most persistent person,
And that's, like persistence and grit I think is a very undervalued skill, or something that people don't often like look at. But yeah, doubling down, committing to doing something. I think it certainly sets folks apart, right? Like that's, to me, I look at, that's the moral of the tortoise and the hare, not necessarily like slow and steady, but like, no, that turtle was persistent. He kept going, right?
Yep.
I think, Courtney, when you're working with people, if you're training or in a learning development situation, or if you're mentoring, I think if they will pick up on your persistence. And can you think of any examples of that, maybe offhand, where that's worked, where it's kind of when that idea of persistence has been transferred to somebody that you've worked with?
Probably more than I'm aware of. I definitely know that I'm persistent enough in like an idea that I pursue, that I can sometimes convince other people that my really bad idea might actually be a good idea, and get other people on board with my really bad idea. But I've managed to charge forward with designs where we're working in a small team and the electrical design is mine, and I was able to justify it enough to get the other two people to jump in and work on it with me, even though about halfway through the project it was like, wow, I really kind of picked a wrong direction for this. But I was apparently convincing enough that neither of you guys caught that it was also a bad idea. So we're all in it together. So we band together and make it work. But I've had those moments where partway through something I realize not only was the idea bad, I convinced everybody around me that it was good.
But then you also had an opportunity to work with them to improve on it.
We made it work.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we make it work by the end of it.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things
you're in with.
I always joke with people that a decision can only be a good or a bad decision before you make it, because now that you've made it, it is the decision. And it's the decision. It's the one you've got to work with now. So, at that point now, it's not good or bad. You just got to make it happen.
Just got to go with it. And then again, post decision, you can look back on it and say, was that a good idea or not?
Hindsight is always 2020. I know how to do projects quickly and effectively now because of how many I did not quickly and not effectively in the past.
It's iteration.
Yes. Get those reps in.
Yeah. So I want to come back to kind of working with folks, on the shop floor. I mentioned, and this is something that you and I had discussed prior, is, oftentimes you're automating tasks that are very repetitive or not necessarily fun, or can be quite mundane for people. So when you're working on an application, how does automation, or how often does it interact with people on the floor, and what's really the impact that robots have on the day-to-day life of the worker? I know it can certainly vary based on the specific application, but I'm curious to hear your experience kind of like in the trenches when it comes to automation.
Yeah, so the earliest ones that I did were automating away visual inspection, because it's not necessarily that people don't want to do it or that employers don't want people doing it. It's that if you take an employee who's had a full pot of coffee and 8 hours of sleep, you've probably got about 20 good minutes out of that person, looking at this thing over and over again before they go snowblind, 100 parts in, and it all just kind of starts to look the same. And it's not any particular person's fault. It's kind of like a known effect that after so many minutes, you just don't have any more good, you've run out of oomph to really be able to identify very small defects and things like that. So most of those times, I feel people were kind of happy to not be having to do this all day as their job, and really kind of their job becomes identifying what is it that I'm looking for when I'm doing this, and then programming a vision system to also see that. And, when we deploy these things, we end up teaching people how to add stuff after the fact, because if you get a new product after you buy my machine, are you going to call me to come from California over to program the new product, or am I going to teach you how to open it up and do your own programming? So a lot of times I've found that people are happier to be programming, their new product as opposed to sitting there and staring at it, 20 minutes at a time. The other one is really mundane grinding and sanding tasks that have a really high turnover rate. So I went into places more than once where somebody's job was to pick this thing up and then zzz, zzz on a belt, zzz, zzz on a belt. And that's all they did all day was reach into a bucket of parts and sand two sides of a thing. And people programming a robot to do that instead also seem to be a little bit happier to be doing that instead of, like basically mindlessly reaching into a bucket all day. I think there's a small percentage of people that really do kind of like the Zen feel of just kind of, a monotonous task. Every once in a while, I need to, go do something that's a little bit brainless myself. But for an 8-hour shift, I feel that I would be grateful to let a robot do that instead of me.
Yeah. Well, I think specifically sanding. I was recently hearing that. Yeah. I would love to have like little robots that I could just plug on my wall and have them sand things. And I think I heard about that recently. So, coming soon to the Home Depot.
That would be if it was available in Home Depot, I would buy that. Yeah, immediately. We did my husband and I actually did our own remodeling at one point, and I think drywall sanding is the worst thing. And I believe that when I watched other people say this, there's a system that was doing drywall finishing. I don't recall anybody saying, "Hey, that's my job."
Yeah, thank goodness. Like, you can handle that. I'll go find something else to do.
I'll stand out here while the robot sands in there.
Yeah. So we have a question here from Mike Unger. What are some of the approaches that you have taken to help frontline workers become comfortable with new technology? So you mentioned kind of training them to program or to enter new applications. What are some other ways that you have helped them kind of adjust to these new coworkers?
So a good thing I feel we do with our distributors is going in for robot demos. So if the company is, smart about it, when we go to do a demonstration, they'll bring in the people that are most impacted by that robot. And I feel like putting the teach pendant of the robot in their hands and saying, here, move this thing, make it move over, having them control the robot a little bit for about 5 minutes and move, open, close grippers, pick up a part and be like, hey, can you think of ways to put this in front of your job and make it do things for you that you don't want to do? And their mind kind of starts, yeah, actually I can see what I use this for, but you involve them in the process from the beginning. And then I feel like they've got buy-in on it. And you've got, somebody who's championing the technology in the background.
Well, I think that also comes back to what we were discussing earlier of like when you're looking at taking a new role, like you want to see areas that you have to learn and grow. Like must be super motivating to also like to start gathering the basic skills to be able to program this robot and then know that in the future you're going to have a lot of different challenges that are coming with it, but you have the tools and you're equipped to do it thanks to training from you guys that you're going to be able to like tackle those future challenges.
I think if it's just them touching it for 5 minutes makes them feel like this is attainable. Like, yes, I can learn this. In 5 minutes, I can figure out how to jog the robot. Then learning how to use it effectively is something attainable. That's for a lot of people, they see a robot and they're like, I'm not trained for that. I don't want to use that thing. I'm like, really? Nobody like jumps in already knowing how to use a robot, but you've spent a few minutes with this robot. It's really not that difficult to navigate. And
So how do you make that like approachable for those who may be throwing their hands back and saying, this is not my area of expertise. I don't think I can handle this.
I personally have whipped out a video of my daughter when she was 2, navigating the menus. And it's not necessarily to be like, hey, a 2-year-old can do it, even you can, because that can be off-putting. But like, just the sight of a little person kind of going, oh, this is up, this is down. Like, okay, yes, Mr. 35-year-old engineer, I'm pretty sure you can figure out what up and down do on the robot. And then, once they kind of get a couple of familiar things, it's like everything else just kind of floods in. At least that's my take on it.
I think get out there and try, right?
Yeah. Well, as if it can go up and it can go down, well, then it can go left and right. What else can it do?
I think there's certain assumptions that people have about the complexity of automation, and I think once you show them they're becoming friendlier all the time, then it really maybe gets their guard down, and they're more willing to learn.
Yeah, that's why I use the word attainable, because it doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy, but you are capable of learning it, or you're capable of deploying it. In our cases, the robot's very easy to use, almost deceptively easy to use, the way I like to put it, where people are like, oh, I could just do this whole thing by myself. And automation still has challenges. It's still a bit difficult, but if you, I don't want to say have half a brain cell, but if you're a competent adult and you've got this job and you're talking to me, you're probably capable of working your way through this solution and getting it deployed. So it becomes less intimidating, I think, when it's right in front of you and it does something very simple like pick a pen off the table.
Now, including the operator in the solution, in addition to that, what would you consider, a recommendation you'd have for companies that are considering investing in the automation?
I will say that the last thing that I want to hear is a company with zero experience in automation jumping in and saying, I want to do 3D bin picking. So I like to encourage going for the low-hanging fruit, and I know everybody else. If you talk to integrators and other people in this industry, they'll probably say the same thing, is instead of going for that really difficult task that may be tempting to attack, to go for maybe something a little bit easier, like that guy who's just sanding this piece over and over again, where you have a high turnover rate because people don't want to be in there sanding and grinding and doing this really repetitive task. And it doesn't require all the hardware purchase. So if you want to jump right in and do 3D bin picking, you've got to buy a robot, you've got to buy the camera software or the scanner that you're going to use. You've got to buy the thing that's going to make them talk to each other, or you've got to pay for somebody to integrate those things, or you have to spend your own time integrating those things, all of which have a cost. So your very first system becomes very expensive. So the first system that you deploy is going to be a difficult to deploy one and is going to cost a lot of money. So when you go to management and say, hey, we've all talked about this and we've come up with a plan and it's going to be $170K, all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, I wanted to automate until you told me that number and now I don't want to do it anymore. If you start with just the robot doing that one guy's repetitive task, you can get in, likely under 6 figures. You might still need an integrator to come help you program it, but their cost is going to be much lower because they're not programming, 3D vision guided robotics. They're helping you run through a simple program. But if you get that project done, now you have a robot. You're getting your ROI from that robot. It's doing stuff. You've got management happy because there's a robot there actually doing things, and he's going to have a better taste in his mouth the next time you say, hey, I want to do this slightly more difficult project that could probably, free up even more resources, but we've got to invest this much in it. Management, I think, is more likely to go for that after they've already got one robot in the house that's kind of getting them some ROI and doing good things for them.
Yeah, that's the low hanging fruit is certainly a buzzword, but it's, I think it's like a buzzword for a reason in the industry, because I think precisely to your point, it makes success attainable and something where you're able to see that return and gain that experience that's going to be needed for a more complex operation in the future. Do you have any examples that you're able to share of kind of tasks that you've gone in to help people with, instead of 3D bin picking, you decided to go for X that was a success, and helping customers kind of be a little more realistic in their approaches?
Yeah, so there's maybe not specific examples that I'll go into, but cases where a customer did want to, 3D bin pick and load an operation where somewhere down the line, it made more sense to maybe start with a robot palletizing the product at the end. So once they had that going, and that actually freed up some resources, and, they could deploy more than one robot to do the palletizing once it was working for the one palletizing line. Then they could come back later to revisit okay, now there's robots palletizing on these. Can we experiment with making it do, vision guided anything? But they could actually pull one of their existing robots off of a line and experiment with it versus, needing to buy the entire vision guided system from scratch. And they were able to kind of do some proof of concept work, themselves, instead of paying somebody else to do proof of concept, because they have their own parts, and they have, at least most shops that I've been to have at least an ability to cobble something together as an end of arm tool if they like cut it out of 80/20 and a bunch of suction cups versus, shopping for a correct gripper. But like you'll have they'll come together to do the proof of concept on this one part and say, hey, look, management, we did this with our own robot. If you buy another one, we can do this. So I've seen that kind of technique work out in the past. You've already got the robot. If you do the low-hanging fruit, you've already got the robot in your shop. You can make it prove another concept. Although in a lot of cases, that robot becomes fully utilized once they see what it can do. And they're like, no, don't take that robot. Don't do anything with that robot. Buy another one.
Well, because when you were sharing the example of if they were to opt for this, very big investment with a lot of integration, a lot of complexity, kind of in the back of my mind as you were describing that, I was like, that sounds so sticky. And that is going to be an investment where you get entrenched, and then you're not going to ever want to use that robot to do anything differently because you're still waiting on that return for this big, expensive product, or kind of sell. So when it comes to, again, smaller applications or use cases, that flexibility, which is not something that I think is typically associated with robots, right? That flexibility of use, I think, is something really interesting. And I'd love to, know more about how you can, how you're training folks to program robots differently to do different tasks, and kind of that range of options that customers have with a specific design. That was a very nebulous question, but it's really interesting to kind of dive into the flexibility that robots have. Because I think, oftentimes we have an idea of okay, a robot's designed to do one thing and do it well and do it consistently, but that's not true.
So that's traditional
not entirely
industrial
true.
Robots. They're designed to do one task, and they're designed to do it, very well. And it's the high volume, low mix for traditional robots, and it requires a fence, and it moves very fast. With cobots, it's a bit of a different game, because now, depending on your risk assessment, right, you still have, just because it's a collaborative robot doesn't mean it's just safe, because if it's wielding a machete or a blowtorch, it's not as safe.
I did see the one wielding machete on your LinkedIn. That was very fun.
Yeah, well, so I've been making that joke with an old boss for years, several old bosses. It's like, if it's wielding a blowtorch, or if it's wielding we talk about unloading raw, cut product that's still sharp. It's basically holding a sword. You still got to do that safety assessment. But if your risk assessment shows that the robot does not need to be guarded, which I'd say the vast majority of projects I've worked with, the robot has not needed a cage. So those robots become very easy to redeploy, because you don't have to pick up this whole fence and carry the fence along with it. You can just do light curtains or area scanners or whatever, which basically take the robot on a wheeled pedestal and drop a few pins in the floor and move it to a new location, and it can do a whole new task. So if you don't have enough volume to justify having a traditional robot, having one that you can redeploy is a really, for me, it was a novel idea when I got introduced to UR. Even before I worked for them, I was like, wow, this robot doesn't need a fence around it. What can I do with that? Or how easy can I move it around? Turns out it's very easy. And they're making a lot of products now for being able to grab the new coordinate frame. You're in one machine and you pick up the robot, move it to another. You have a whole new coordinate system that you need to lock onto, but they make these little things with a gripper and something on the machine where you can go, bloop, and now all of a sudden it knows that it's connected to this machine and its coordinate system changes. So it's a very flexible tool now compared to just fenced off traditional industrial robots. It's like you drop bolts in the floor, that's where that thing lives. It's never moving from, and it's only ever going to do this job.
So this idea of a modular line or modular manufacturing, do you see that as something that's going to be more of the future in manufacturing?
I would say probably not in a big manufacturing plant, but in smaller, I mean, we call them job shops where, they're not doing the same thing every single day. I see this becoming probably more useful in the future. The funny thing about it, like practically, it seems like people have that idea in their head that, oh, I'm going to get this robot and I can totally redeploy it. But once that robot starts doing the first task that they program it to do, they're very happy with it. And it usually stays right there doing that task. Even though in their mind, they're like, oh, I'm going to redeploy this thing several times. They just get really happy with it doing that one task. And they're like, I think it's really great what it's doing right now. Maybe I'll get another one.
They don't want to part with it.
Yeah, well, the returns that I'm seeing or the gains that I'm seeing are something that I like enough that I don't want you to unplug that or disturb it in any way.
Now, last month, you attended IMTS in Chicago. Is that right?
Yes.
That's right. Now, looking back at the event, was there something you experienced or something that attracted your attention that really excited you?
So I was actually staff while I was there. So I taught some trainings and I got a few breaks to walk the floor, but I didn't get to see as much technology as I wanted to. I will say that the thing that I looked both at Automate and IMTS was that just the concept of being there with other human beings showcasing technology. I was craving that again since the pandemic. But there was also this aspect of a scenery change that took place because of social media. And I'm still having trouble putting words to that, but it was like we all kind of tried to get our fix talking to each other and showcasing technology and everything on LinkedIn or wherever we were getting it from, and built up this huge community over a year and a half, 2 years that had never met each other in person ever. And then all of a sudden at Automate and IMTS, it's like I'm excited to be here and see people again and see technology again. But also there's all these people that I've been talking to for the last 2 years that I've never actually met in person. So that for me this year was really exciting. Just getting together with other human beings in person, not on a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, but getting to talk about, what were you, even if the technology wasn't there in front of you, it's like, what were you working on? What cool things did you do during this whole fiasco? And it's been that part has just been a ton of fun because there's like all these different stories people have of different ways they adapted. So this building of community and the return to the trade show scene itself, I think, was the best part of this year.
Yeah, we had some other co-founders of the Industry 4.0 Club who were at IMTS. I unfortunately didn't have the pleasure of going, but yeah, I definitely felt that energy at Automate. And want to ask, did IMTS have a beer pouring robot?
I didn't see it, but yes, I heard there may have been more than one. Gosh, I can't remember who had it though, because people were like, "Oh, I'm gonna go get me a beer." So I knew it was happening, but I can't tell you who was doing it.
I think I saw Boston Dynamics.
Oh, Boston Dynamics. So we had an education booth downstairs for the student summit, and our next door neighbor was Boston Dynamics. And so I had this demo going and like I was filming it and I just kind of looked over. I'm like, there's Spot, like basically dancing on the platform next to me. I was like, that's the closest I've ever been to one, honestly. I texted my mom about it. I was so excited. She asked me, are they going to let you program it? I said, absolutely not. He's behind a steel.
Well, I just remember like a Spot had been programmed for a Super Bowl commercial to like catch beers and then pour them.
Nice.
So hence I was thinking, I was like, well, maybe Spot could do that for you next time.
It seems to be a popular thing is making robots pour beer or serve you coffee right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it sure gets people to gather around. And
I like-
it reinforces that community
beer,
aspect,
you need
right?
coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
I like to see them scoop ice cream someday.
That would actually be an interesting task. It would require some force.
Courtney's getting excited, like to go buy some pints of Ben and Jerry's and see what I can do.
Yeah, I like this thought.
Now, we'd like to give a shout out to Universal Robots for being number 3 in the top 10 technologies at the show.
I thought that was pretty cool. We even came in apparently ahead of Boston Dynamics on that article.
Cool.
I think maybe at this point everybody's seen Spot now and they're like, I've seen him before.
Sorry, got to stay hydrated.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So, was that something? And are you familiar with how that was evaluated?
I don't.
Okay.
Actually, I don't know how they make those decisions or what metrics were evaluated against. To be honest, one thing that we had going for us in our booth was it was a very applications based booth. So there were 16 robots, I think, all doing different applications from welding to press brake tending to they had a little baby like mock CNC machine to tend. So there was there was even a grinding one or a sanding and grinding one. So it wasn't just the UR20 we were showcasing, but all these different applications that you've joined together with a UR Plus partner, and there's like a fully thought through solution, out the door. And I think that showed very well because our booth was always full of people who were walking by, seeing something and going, that is my application right there. I need a robot to weld. I need a robot to sand. I got a press brake. I need it to do exactly that. So I think just our setup of showing off the actual applications worked out very well.
Yeah, again, that flexibility of use cases, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say that was good. That I was suspecting that it really comes down to applications, and from what you're sharing, I think that my suspicion is confirmed. So, the theme of our fall 22 session here at Women in Manufacturing and the Industry 4.0 Club is Trailblazers. And it's clear that you have found your path and calling with industrial automation and have certainly had to blaze a trail and pivot. And it wasn't always easy. And so I'm curious now that you're reflecting, as you reflect back, what would you tell your younger self in times of difficulty or doubt? And what advice would you have for other women who are still searching for their path and finding that convergence of passion and skills?
I'll say don't bail out on it, but keep experimenting with it. There may be inputs and outputs that need adjusting, and it's always maybe I went into electrical engineering, but maybe embedded systems wasn't for me, but I found automation because I kept kind of experimenting with what was the actual skill set I was doing. So it's just always keep experimenting, changing aspects of it instead of just clearing the table and starting over.
Yeah. And that, I think that takes a certain amount of patience and, one that I often, I think, struggle with myself, and trust that that's going to, pay off. Right.
Right.
I think everyone's very tempted to kind of clear the table and start over on a clean slate because it can get messy in the middle, and finding those variables to isolate and adjust is not an easy task.
Right. Well, it's easy to think I've added too much salt. Now I need to dump this whole stew, but you can, a really good cook can always rescue a good stew, right?
For that, I always call my mom. You got to have people. You got to have people in your repertoire.
You got to have a mentor.
Call. Yes.
And then,
go ahead.
Probably too late to add that, but try to find a good mentor, because having a good mentor to vent to can be the thing that turns your whole day around sometimes.
Yeah, and I think too, finding, again, like online communities or people where you can get like-minded folks to kind of geek out with, and then like ask their advice, or like find someone who is doing really cool work on a product or in a company that you admire and kind of get their takes on it. All helps you inform like the way that you're going to be kind of bushwhacking your own trail. Right. And it's been, I think, certainly difficult for a lot of folks in this time where a lot of us are working remote and are kind of like isolated and on an island, but those communities are out there. We got, we all meet some really cool people just from these online communities. Like I can say that for myself here with the Industry 4.0 Club has been a godsend. And, you introduced me to a whole lot of people too that you met from online communities when we were at Automate. So yeah. Like they do have real world benefits and can be very, supportive and helpful. So just kind of doubling down on that aspect.
Yep.
Okay, now that we're approaching the end of our time, usually, Courtney, what we do is we go around the room and we share what we think is maybe our final thoughts or takeaways on what we've discussed. And I'll leave you with the final word. So maybe Grace, we can go okay. To you first.
All right, I'm trying to rapidly form a thought. I think this has just really, our conversation and kind of the conversations we've had leading up to this really drive home for me that, importance and value of persisting, especially when things are tough. And that nurturing that and not being afraid of failure or kind of getting stuck, like solving a problem. A lot of things take a lot of time. And I think we're always looking around and seeing other people, achieving or advancing or doing whatever. But the comparison is the death of just a lot of confidence that we have in ourselves, and being patient and again, fueling that passion that you have for something is really the key to driving forward. And I think that's just a very valuable thing to reflect on, because it is easy to say that you want to throw in the towel and start over, but then you don't often get to realize the value or see the fruits of all that labor that you put in. So that's just a nice lesson that I like to kind of chew on, because it's a chewy one, that's for sure. But there's a lot of beautiful things that come out of it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Grace. I think we're exactly on the same page there as far as our takeaways. I'm thinking about persistence as well. And I think, Courtney, you've developed a set of tools and mindset for how to tackle hard things and what to do when you've come across maybe a plateau or a spot where you can't move forward anymore. And it's that. When we know where to go, questions to ask when we have hard times, then then we can be persistent and then celebrate success. And it sounds like you've learned how to do that over time. And I'm hoping that we can help encourage others to push through hard times with persistence. So we're on the same page there. So I'll leave the last word with you, Courtney.
I think persistence has probably been the most important thing that I've worked on or developed for myself, as far as, if I were to list anything else, it would be definitely well below that as a number one. I think it's more important than being smart. And I think it's more important than being, naturally good at something. It's just the ability to keep hammering at it and getting those reps in, but just continuing to repeat it until you're good at it. If it is something that you want to be good at, or that endless cycle of evaluation in your own head am I getting good at this? And is this really what I want to do? And do I need to adjust parameters? Do I need to tweak this a little bit? It's a really important, just the iterative cycle. Nothing is permanent. So I always just try to remember that nothing is permanent. If things are constantly changing, so I need to be constantly changing. What is my mindset and what is my approach?
It's a great takeaway. And I will be looking to apply that in my day-to-day this week. That'll be how can we iterate and make things improve? This has been a great conversation, Courtney. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. And thank you so much for joining us here today.
Likewise. Thank you guys for having me. It's always a great conversation.
Now, before we close, Courtney, want to thank you for joining us. And we really appreciate your knowledge and experience and sharing that with us and sharing it with others. Mm-hmm. And maybe you could give us an idea of how people can reach out to you if they need to.
Oh, yeah. You can always reach out to me on my LinkedIn. I have a Universal Robots email, which is, I think, in my personal info. I won't blast it out there on the website. But if there's ever like Universal Robot specific questions, you can always send me a Universal Robots email. Otherwise, if you just ever want to chat with me, you can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm not as good at responding to every single message as I used to be, but I'm a pretty chatty Kathy. So if you send me a message, it's a good chance I'll chat with you.
Especially if you invite her for tacos.
Oh, yeah. I'll put a GPS location or a GPS pin.
Excellent. Thanks. And thank you to everyone who joined us in the audience today. And if you like having conversations like this, look out for more LinkedIn live shows or LinkedIn audio, including our Fireside Chat coming up this Wednesday with Remus Pop, Senior Solution Architect at Amazon Web Services. They'll be talking about leveraging today's advanced manufacturing. So for updates and notifications, we encourage you to follow the Industry 4.0 Club and Courtney on LinkedIn. And Courtney, I think we will plan to see you again at IME West in 2023.
Sounds good to me.
And we wish you all a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.